Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today, I would like to discuss the theme of growing older and the wisdom of age, as it is present in Stephen King's short story collection from last May, You Like It Darker. I recently had the wonderful experience of buddy reading this collection with my good friend Alan at Alan's Reads. We had a delightful experience of reading and meeting to discuss a couple of stories each time, share our impressions throughout the month of May. We were both reading this as part of Horror Mayhem. Alan has been reading Stephen King for a good part of his life, although he said that there was a period of time when he wasn't reading Stephen King and he's catching up on those novels now. He brought to our discussion, though, just a wealth of knowledge and experience in just the whole body of work of Stephen King, and he brought that to our discussions. I have had a very different experience with Stephen King. I was a young teenager when King published his first novel, Carrie, though it was not the first novel that he wrote. It was his first novel that he published. I can remember in 1974, I remember Carrie going through my 8th grade class like wildfire. I can still remember the day that I bought the paperback copy when I was on a walk into town. It was our weekly walk on Saturdays with my best friend. We would go into town. We would go to the bookstore, the record store, the local 5 and 10. And I remember buying that book and coming home with it. Last year, for the 50th anniversary of Carrie, I reread the novel as part of my reading, both for Horror Mayhem and also for my reading for the Read 24 in 2024 Banned Book Challenge created by my friend MJ at Reading This Life. While I didn't think that the book held up to my recollections of it as a young teenager, I was, this time around coming at it as a much older person and as someone who had been a teacher, for my whole adult life. I was very, very moved by Carrie for its presentation of the topic of bullying, a topic that any teacher today is going to be acutely sensitized to. While I don't think there was anything particularly extraordinary about the prose in Carrie, I certainly did think it was an important book, at least because of the themes that it portrays. I did not become a reader of Stephen King as a result of my introduction to him in the 8th grade. I read a few of his other books later in my teens and in my early 20s. I remember The Shining, and I remember seeing the movies that were related to his early novels as well, all of which completely terrified me. I was not a reader of horror at that time in my life. I came back to Stephen King much later when I was refreshing the curriculum of a contemporary fiction course with a colleague of mine. We decided to add a number of kid-friendly, reader-friendly books to this senior elective in contemporary fiction in order to try to capture the attention of some kids who really found reading to be very difficult. The course seemed to attract a number of what we would call reluctant readers. And among the things that we added to try to be more kid-friendly and reader-friendly, among those things was Stephen King's novel, The Green Mile. I've made a separate video on that in my series on books that I loved to teach. And I'll put a link to that down below in case you're interested in that. The thing that was kind of amazing about our teaching The Green Mile was that, there were kids who used to brag about never having read a book or never having completed a book, as if that was something to brag about. And they suddenly, like overnight, became readers because they loved The Green Mile. I think I talked in that video also about having parents who even read along with their kids when we were doing that novel. So I will always have a special place in my heart for The Green Mile, because I can say with no exaggeration that it turned non-readers into readers overnight. I've read other Stephen King novels through the years, but usually the ones that probably would not be considered hardcore horror. I really liked 11/22/63. I liked some of the Hard Case Crime series. I thought they were fun. I loved the novella The Body, which was the basis for the movie Stand By Me. But I was coming to this buddy read with Alan, this buddy read of this collection of short stories, with really minimal experience of Stephen King when you consider how much Stephen King has written and how much Alan has read. I really enjoyed this collection. I liked this book a lot. We said in all of our discussions about it that it seemed to be a mixed collection in terms of overall quality of the stories, but there are some really, really good short stories in this collection. I was absolutely struck, though, in reading this collection by the frequency with which Stephen King revisits the theme of growing older. King is frequently lauded for his portrayal of young people, kids and teens especially. He does the coming of age theme particularly well, but I was totally surprised in this volume to find that the mature writer of over 200 short stories, and I don't even know how many novels, I know it's more than 60 novels, or more than 70 novels, I think. I was really, really surprised by the way that he is now giving serious consideration to the theme of aging and all of the issues that entails. I've discussed this theme with several other readers. I've been talking about this book, obviously with Alan, also with Stuart at Stuart Griffin. We've been sort of chatting about it in comments, in mostly my weekly wrap-up videos. Just several other people, closer to my age group. Alan is not in my age group. Stuart is, and we have noticed this theme in this recent collection, and I think we've really appreciated the consideration that the king of horror, and probably one of the most prolific writers in America, is giving to the theme of aging. I'm not sure how profoundly that theme resonates with his younger audience. He has definitely a younger and largely male readership, though I know lots and lots of women who also read everything that Stephen King writes. But I don't know if this theme resonates with the younger readers. I'd have to talk with some of them. I'm looking forward to talking to my friend Kevin at Kevin Toll Reads. He's read everything that Stephen King has ever written, so I want to talk to him about this theme as well. But this mid-60s female retired English teacher found this collection to be very poignant. I'm going to discuss just a few of the stories where I thought the aging process was really central to the work, just to illustrate my point. There's a short story in the collection called Laurie. This is a short story that was originally released as a free download on King's website back in 2018, so quite a few years before this collection was released. This is what I would probably have to call an atypically sweet story about a man and his dog. It's about a 65-year-old retiree and recent widower named Lloyd, whose sister decides that he must have a dog. and she gifts him this dog, Laurie. And Laurie is a border collie. And she says that he needs to take care of this dog. He needs to have something to take care of, and that the dog will help to ward off loneliness now that he is without his wife. Well, Lloyd insists that he doesn't want a dog, that he doesn't need a dog, he doesn't want this dog or any other dog. And then, of course, as the story progresses, he grows to love the dog and very much wants to keep Laurie in his life. There's some potential horror in this story in that there is a 10-foot long killer alligator, but ultimately Laurie, the border collie, plays something of a heroic role in the story and in Lloyd's life, I would say. The story offers us a poignant look at issues that often come with later life. Retiring from one's profession, the loss of a spouse, dealing with loneliness. The very first story in the collection, entitled Two Talented Bastids, is more speculative fiction than horror, and at more than 60 pages, it's probably more of a novella than it is a short story. But this is the story of two lifelong friends, two aging friends. Well, actually, when the story begins, one of the friends has already passed away. But this is the story of Laird Carmody, who is a best-selling author, and his best friend, David Butch Laverdiere, who is an artist. And both of these men came to their great success in their respective arts kind of later in life, more toward middle age than early in their careers. At the outset of the story, Butch has already died, and a local freelance writer is desperate to get an interview with Laird in an effort to find out how these two lifelong friends suddenly in their mid-40s had become these great successes in their respective creative arts. There seems to be some very mysterious circumstances behind their sudden awakening and success in their mid-40s. So before his death, Laird tells his middle-aged son, Mark, where he can go to find the true explanation for his and for Butch's artistic success. Many critics have interpreted this story as being a reflection of King and his own meditation on his creative inspiration and his very long writing career. The story on Slide in Road was originally published in Esquire magazine in 2020, and then it was reprinted in this collection last year. The story was inspired by Flannery O'Connor's 1953 story, A Good Man is Hard to Find. And King acknowledges O'Connor at the end of his tale. My friend Hannah at Hannah's Books did a delightful review of King's story and compared it to O'Connor's story when the book first came out last spring. And I'm going to try to put a link to Hannah's video in the notes below as well. I really urge you to check that out. And this was Hannah's first experience of reading Stephen King. Stephen King uses the basic frame of O'Connor's story as a way to explore intergenerational conflict. In O'Connor's story, there's a family on a road trip when the grandmother, who is largely ignored or outright insulted by her grandkids, insists on taking a shortcut, and this ends in a brutal tragedy. Well, in King's story, we once again have an intergenerational family taking a road trip. This time, we have a widowed grandfather who is also a Vietnam vet accompanying the family. While the parents regard the grandfather as something of a nuisance, the children definitely love him and find his crass language and humor to be really entertaining. So what annoys the parents absolutely delights the children. In a complete twist from Flannery O'Connor's story, the old grandfather is in fact the hero of this family, and he is able to ward off catastrophe when the family is threatened by a couple of murderers that they encounter when they make a wrong turn. Clearly, in this story, Stephen King is exploring the way the elderly are perceived and treated, and he absolutely turns our expectations upside down. Rattlesnakes, another novella in the collection, revisits the characters and setting of King's 1981 novel, Cujo. Here we meet up again with protagonist Vic Trenton, who lost his son Tad in the earlier novel. It's now many years later. Vic had gotten divorced from his wife Donna after Tad's death in Cujo, and then they remarried years later. Now, in this new story, or novella really, Donna has just died. While this one definitely is a horror story with many of the familiar King tropes, such as demonic twins and a possessed inanimate object, in this case it's a stroller, there is also plenty of realism in the tale. And King gives us an extraordinary portrait of an older man struggling with unimaginable grief and trying to make peace with his past. The Answer Man is the final story in the collection, and definitely one of the best. Although it's a story that was published for the first time in this collection. It is one that King had actually started writing in 1977, and then he abandoned it. In somewhere in the 2010s, Stephen King's nephew found the unfinished manuscript of this story, and he convinced his uncle to finish it. The story in this volume is dedicated to King's nephew. In The Answer Man, our main character, Phil Parker, first encounters in 1937 a person who advertises himself as the Answer Man, who, for $25, will answer your questions about the future for 5 minutes. Phil learns certain things about his future with his girlfriend, with his parents, with his career, and with the impending World War. He encounters the Answer Man at several different points in his life, from 1937 through 1995, and he gains answers to questions about his life that he may not necessarily want to know in advance. Many critics have called this one of King's greatest short stories ever. Stephen King himself, in both an NPR interview and also a bit in his afterword in this collection, he talked about the experience of finishing a story at age 75 that he had started writing when he was 30. He described the experience of talking to his younger self from his current perspective as an old man. It's a story about our ordinary lives intersecting with the supernatural, which is something that Stephen King does very well. And it's another story of an older man coming to terms with, coping with loss and grief, and facing his own mortality as well. I have read a lot about this collection since Alan and I finished our buddy read, and since I've been thinking about this theme that seems to be running through at least half of this collection. But I really haven't read anything, where anyone is writing about this. About the fact that Stephen King keeps coming back to this this theme, and that he's devoted half of the stories to an exploration of the theme. Now, I haven't read all the other things that Stephen King has written recently, so I don't know whether this is a theme that he's visiting and revisiting in his works, since he's been writing into his 70s. But it certainly is a major theme of this collection, where he's devoted at least half of the stories to elderly protagonists who are coping in one way or another with issues related to later life, whether it be retirement or workplace problems as one ages, or the diminishment of one's sense of agency in the world as one ages, the loss of loved ones, including spouses, children, and friends, nostalgia and longing for the past, and the reality of one's own mortality. Now, these are certainly not issues that are exclusive to mature age, but for this reader anyway, it was refreshing to read so many stories dealing with mature protagonists facing issues that concern my place in life. He repeatedly revisits the theme of the resourcefulness of age and the wisdom of age. In at least half of these stories, the protagonists are at a point in their lives where others in their world might not value them or recognize their contributions as much as they used to be recognized. And over again in these stories, King demonstrates that they do indeed have very great worth. This is definitely the work of a man who has been writing and publishing for over 50 years and who is clearly facing all of these issues himself. It felt as though he was inviting a whole new set of readers to the table in this collection. As always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.